Hello, so it's Michael here. Today I'm inside UE4. I'm going to be doing a bit of a tutorial, hopefully going over how to use the save game object functionality within UE4, and hopefully sort of learn something along the way. Okay then, so what I'm going to do is in essence create a collectible that when the player picks it up, it remembers when you close out the editor and load back up. So it'll automatically only show the collectibles that still need collecting, as an example. So what I've got in front of me is a project which is pretty much using the first person template. I have done a few things in here already, most of which is just a simple door. But what I'm going to do is just go ahead and start creating some new blueprints within here. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a collectible. Nice and simple actor. I'll call this collectible. Quick save. Alright, so we'll open that up. So all I want to do is just add a simple mesh in here. So dragging that from the content browser straight to the side. I do know this cube's quite large, so I'm just going to quickly scale that down to 25%, should be enough. Okay. So I do apologise if I'm going quite fast on this particular section. I just want to get something straightforward, get it in the level. Okay, quickly see what that's like. Yeah, it's not a bad size collectible, so we'll go with that. Right then, so the next thing I want to add to the cube in this instance is some sort of collision capsule. I'm going to go ahead and add a sphere collision. This could be, call it trigger. Nothing too fancy. Okay. I just want to make sure that that's large enough. Something like that. And what I'm going to do as well on the actual cube is just disable the collision altogether. No collision. So this just means the player will be able to walk straight through the cube. So it doesn't actually block the player when it's walking through it. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is do a simple overlap event. So on the trigger, just right click, add event, on component begin, overlap. So I'm just going to do something. Still got trigger on the mind. So what I'm going to do is do a quick print screen, just make sure that's actually working. Let's leave that at hello. Yeah, so if you can see at the top left there, it just says hello whenever I overlap it. Right then. Okay, yeah, so it is a little bit on the fly, this tutorial, so there may be sort of sections where it goes a little bit quiet. It's kind of my brain trying to think through what it is that sort of need to do on the next steps. So we've sort of got this working already. I suppose we can just go ahead and destroy actor, and we'll leave the print string in there, and we'll just do destroyed collectible. That's just so we know it's actually doing something. So with this one, walk into it and it gets destroyed. Nice and simple. Okay, so the hard part is actually dealing with saving that particular state. So when the player walks into it, you don't want it to reappear. So this is where things start going into saving. So the way I like to do things is using a manager. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new blueprint, select actor. I'm just going to call this Collectible Manager. Collectible Manager. So this particular blueprint itself, all it's going to actually deal with is whether or not it needs to be showing the particular blueprint or not from save data. So I'm not going to do anything with that just yet, but we're just going to go and create a new blueprint. This time under all classes you want to choose save game. I'm just going to call this SGO collectible. So SGO is just save game object. Okay, so at this particular point we have to start thinking about what sort of data it is that we're actually wanting to save and keep track of. There's could be quite a few different ways that you could approach this depending on the sort of data that you're wanting to go for, and this should apply to any sort of save game you want. In terms of, okay, I suppose the first thing I want to do is go ahead and actually implement something within the manager to check if we've got a saved game, and if we have, to go ahead and load some data from it, or at least start that. So in the Collectible Manager, just going to start on event begin play. So a few nodes. If you type in save game when you're searching for a node, there should be a few nodes that you'll probably end up using time and time again. First one is, does save game exist? So what this save game exist does is it looks in the save game data folder, which is the actual folder on the hard drive, and it searches for the name that you put in the slot name. If it finds it, it can return true or false. In most cases you'll always end up using it like this, because obviously if you want to know something exists, then you obviously want to do something either way. So for the slot name, I am going to go ahead and create a promote to variable. So from the slot name, promote to variable, and I'm just going to call this save. Let's do it as world save collectible. Actually, put save name, something like that. But what I'm actually going to do is go ahead and create this as instance editable and set to expose on spawn. So this expose on spawn is actually quite useful, because what we can do is when we place the Collectible Manager in the world, on your details panel you should now have that set variable under the defaults. So if we go in here and say, put that as world name collectible. Of course this name can be whatever you like, so if you've got multiple levels, put a name in that's different for each level, and that way you can easily keep track of all the saved data for each individual level, and it's going to prevent you from accidentally loading data from other levels and things like that. So that's that sorted. Let's quickly save. Okay then, so back to here, does save game exist? If the game does exist, we want to load it. So type in load, there should be load game from slot. So save game true, load game from slot. And yet again, just want to plug in that save name into there. And what this is going to do is going to load it and then create a save game object reference, which is what this is. So when we first created this collectible, I'll quickly show you again, and we searched for save game, the save game object is this base class here. That's the object reference. So what we actually want to do is cast this to our collectible, our save game object collectible. And what this will do is when we actually put variables within that object, we can get those references quite easily. And what we then want to do is go ahead and actually save that out to a variable, so we can reference that particular object wherever we want. If we don't do that, then we end up creating this reference that we then lose because we've not referenced anywhere else. So I'm just going to call that SGL collectible. Okay, so that's that one. So that's what we're doing when it's true. Obviously there'll be some other stuff we want to do after the load, but I'll come back to that shortly. So in terms of the false, that means they haven't found a save game. You want to go ahead and create a save game object. So for the game class, this will list all the save game objects that you've got. So you've got the base save game one, which is what our class is based on, as a child of. So go ahead and select our collectible one. And yet again, this also outputs the return value for that particular save game object. This time, however, because we've selected the class type, it automatically outputs it as the object that it is, so we don't have to worry about the casting. So we can go ahead and just plug that straight in to set a variable, just so we've got a reference to it. Another thing that I like to do, you don't need to do it, but I go ahead and actually just save straight away as well. Just so if we do close that and come back in, it should then just default straight to this route the second time round. Of course it's not essential, but it's just something I like to do. Okay, so at this particular point we should actually, let me just go to a sneak peek at all my unfinished projects. Okay, so under your project folder there should be a folder called saved, and inside there should be one called save games. So if you notice there's one in here already, that's for something else that I've been doing. But with this itself, if I go ahead, compile and then play, just by opening it and then closing it out, we should now have one in there with the name. So that's pretty much what we've done thus far. We've told UE4 to create the save file as a starting point. Now we need to start thinking about what things is it that we actually want to save. In terms of the collectible here, the actual collectible, it doesn't actually matter whether or not this knows it's been collected or not, because ideally when we load into the level, because it's something that we physically place in, we can the manager itself can just say delete it as soon as you've got into the level. So in terms of this particular blueprint, we don't need to know has it been collected or not. However, we do need some sort of unique ID. So what we can do is in here, in the construction script, nice and simple, actually create a brand new function. Why not? Let's call this create UID. That's for unique identifier. And then go ahead and add a new variable. I'm going to do this as a string. Usually helps to give it a name first, a UID, and then select variable type of string. So something nice and simple. Create UID, and then what I actually want to do is get display name, and then get reference to self from the beginning of that. Okay, so what is display name? The great thing about display name is it's very useful if you're trying to reference things that you've physically placed in the world. So the display name is this name here. So obviously you've got a collectible manager, or BP underscore collectible manager, that's what it's called. If you look at these door blueprints that I've got in here as well, they've all got numbers next to them. That particular get display name will always get this name, and because this editor, when you place things in the world, it'll only allow you to have a unique name. It's a great way to start, because it means we've got a unique way of identifying this particular object in the world and then doing something with it later on. So that's set nicely, and we can actually test to make sure that's working just by just doing expose on spawn quickly. So this particular object, an instance editable, so you've got this UID there. So in the construction script, go ahead and set that up. So the UID is set in there, but if I actually come in here and change the name, so put 1 next to it, it'll also update the UID in there as well. So it's a great way of being able to easily get that from somewhere else as a single variable without having to worry about getting all this stuff as well. It's just a nice way of keeping things tidy. Okay, so that's the start. Okay, so now what we need to do is actually start looking at the actual save game object itself and looking at the data we want to save. So from your content browser, if you've not got it open already, go ahead and open up your save game object collectible. And under variables, go ahead and add a new variable. For this is going to be collectible state. Of course, all these names are completely arbitrary. You can name them whatever you all want that's applicable. And what I'm going to do is, just next to where it says string, the little drop down where you normally select it as an array, I'm actually going to go ahead and select it as a map. The reason why is because a map can only have one instance of that particular string in it, and then but it gives you an additional variable type. So I'm just going to select Boolean, so true or false. So if you look under the default values, you can sort of see what this actually is. If I leave that blank and try and add another one, I'll get a lovely error message that says the value already exists. But if I put something else in there, I can then add another one. But then I've got separate balls. So if you've not figured it out already, the string is going to be the UID within the actual actor class itself. Okay. So in terms of the actual save game object, that's pretty much all we need to do from here at this moment in time. So now what we actually need to do is get some information into the save game object, which is currently referenced within the Collectible Manager. So this is where we can do something else. So in your collectible, I'm just going to call this collectible. When my brain starts working, Collectible Manager. So this is going to be a reference to that Collectible Manager that we've got. So it's just an object reference. Instance editable, and expose on spawn. So what I'm going to be doing in here, what I'm going to do is, if you notice now, with it selected, there is an additional one underneath the UID. And in the drop down, you'll see that there might be one listed in there, which should hopefully be the Collectible Manager that you spawned in the level. If I delete it, come back into here, you won't actually see anything. So you do need your Collectible Manager actually in the world itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and place that back in. So we're just going to select that. There are ways that you can have it automatically detect the Collectible Manager, which we'll quickly try now. Not actually tested it, but why not? So get all actors of class. So the Collectible Manager. So ideally we only ever want one Collectible Manager in the world, so if there's ever more than two, so do a quick check just for safety. So that should always equal 1. So if it's true, and then we'll just get a copy, and it'll always be the first index. So that itself should work. So if let's clear that out. Well, if I attempt to clear that out, it doesn't work. If I delete that, that changes to none. If I place the Collectible Manager straight back in and select this, move it around to update it, it's automatically picked the Collectible Manager. So something like this can be quite useful. So if I go ahead and add another Collectible Manager in, it's automatically set up your UID and your Collectible Manager as well. So this is just two things you don't have to then worry about setting up every time you had a Collectible Manager, because the idea of setting up systems is to make your life as quick and simple as possible. So I've got two collectibles. So that's a start. Now the next thing we want to do, so also we've got the Destroy Actor and the print screen. So before the Destroy Actor, what we actually want to do is do a few checks. So what I want to do is from the other actor, which I want to cast to the player, which is that one. And the reason why is just to make sure it is actually a player that's overlapped the particular collectible and not something else. So as long as it can cast to it, it can then go ahead and do the next bits that we want to do. Next thing, go ahead and pull your Collectible Manager and go ahead and actually now leave that there. So we'll come to the Collectible Manager first. What we can do, go ahead and create a function, call it initiate collectible. So what I actually want to do is actually add the collectible to the save, whether it's been collected or not. So what we can do, get a save game object, actually go to so I do apologise, sort of chaining things along a bit here. So if you come to your collectible, your save game object collectible, where we've got just a single variable, what we can do, go ahead and add a function, and I'm just going to call this add collectible. Get your collectible state, pull off add, and you can just drag both of these across. So you've got your key for the map. I'm just going to rename that to UID, and then we can rename that to collected. So then if we go back to the Collectible Manager, from here, what we can do is actually call that function, so add collectible. That is a pass by reference, which is not what we want. I actually didn't know it did that. Okay. That's fine, that's fine. Okay, yeah. So, what I actually did there, normally when you add a function in certain variable types, you'll actually get given the option as to what you want to do with it. In this instance, that option wasn't there, and the reason why is because on the actual function itself, for the inputs, pass by reference was selected. So I've gone ahead and unticked that. If it's set to pass by reference, it means it will require that particular reference to be able to do anything else. But I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that, and then the default value you can leave unchecked. So that means if it is left empty, it will automatically default to false, which is perfectly fine. So saving that out. So this is what we've got. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that straight across to the initiate collectible. So that automatically creates your link for you. So what I'm also going to do, I'm actually going to rename this to modify collectible. The reason why is because this add actually works as a modify if the key that you're trying to add to the map already exists, it overrides the one that's already there. So doing it as just having it as modified sort of reminds you that that's what it is. So you'd actually be modifying the UID. So obviously, yet again, it's a name. It's up to you what you want to use. So in terms of initiate, collectible comes along, collected, lovely. So that should work. So the next thing I want to do is coming back to your collectible blueprint. I want to drag off and call the initiate collectible. Oh, do apologize. That's in the wrong place. Let's begin play. Select the UID. So when we first get to begin play, it's going to attempt to initiate collectible. What I should probably do is actually check to see whether or not it already exists. So what we can do is from your save game object, find your variable state and find contains. So I'm going to go ahead and use the contains instead. Pop in a branch. Just do a quick tidy up. Okay, so now we've done a quick check within the Collectible Manager when we go to initiate collectible. So we'll actually check to see whether or not it already exists. The reason why I want to do that is because when we actually load the data in, that in theory should already be there if the last save we created already had the object there. So it's just a safety measure to make sure that we're not overwriting save data with old objects. But it does mean that if we, particularly during testing, if we were adding new collectibles to the world, we don't have to keep removing or deleting the save data just when we add new collectibles. Okay, so that's that. So that's a start. Okay. Right, 1 minute. I do apologise for the flicking back and forth. So initiate collectibles, let's just that, comes along, just modify collectible in there, which is sort of fine. Right then, so back to what we actually do when we're on here. We can come to the Collectible Manager, just go ahead and add a new function. Just call this set collected. So this is going to be very similar to this. So we'll just copy and paste it. Call it UID. The only difference is we want that to be a tick. Hopefully that's all fairly straightforward. Obviously I'll run through everything one last time once everything's sorted. Okay, so we can now grab that. So from the Collectible Manager I want to do set collected. Pop in the UID again. And once we've done that we go and just reactor. So in terms of saving the data, we've not actually quite done yet. So what we want to do, once we've modified that particular data in here, we actually need to save it. So whilst we've made the modification to the objects, that data hasn't actually been saved to disk yet. So what you can do is go ahead and type in save game to slot. You just add in your collectible and your slot name. So this will, whenever it makes a modification, it'll save that data, and we should probably add that to actually I'm not going to add it to initiate. The reason why is because if you've got like 50 objects all initiating, it's going to then attempt to save that data 50 times. Ideally want it to happen once we've finished. So there's a few potential ways we can do that, but I'm just not going to do that just yet. Okay. Okay, so that's saved. Right then. So the next thing we need to do, or work on, is actually dealing with the loading and of the data and applying it accordingly to our world. So if we go back to the Collectible Manager on the event begin play, we added this little section here for when it finds some data already saved. So what we do is pull from there, from the variable itself. You want to go ahead and get your collectible state, and we can get the keys. Actually, that's not what we want to do. Yeah, get all. That's the class Collectible Manager. There are other ways that you could deal with what I'm doing next. Because it's on the event begin play, it's at the very start of the level, so it's not going to be a massive issue. But with something such as this actor, it can be quite resource intensive, so it's definitely not something you want to be using every frame. But for this particular instance, it's quite nice. So for each loop from the output array. So what we wanted to do is get all our collectibles. Yep. So get all our collectibles that we have in our level, and then want to loop through them. So from the array element, we should just be able to get the UID, and then what we want to do is find UID. So the top one is has the value been found, so I want to pull a branch off of that, and then the bottom one we'll go ahead and do another branch, so it's kind of like a double branch. So what we want to do is, if we actually find the UID in the list, that's great. We should always find it, but if for whatever reason we don't, we can always do something to actually handle in that event. So that's kind of more like a bit of a safety net. But the main one we're looking for is this find one here. So if we find it and it's true, that means we've collected it. So what we can then do is actually destroy the collectible. So from the pp collectible, we actually need to add a new function called destroy collectible. Yet again, there can be different ways that you might want to handle this in terms of destroying objects, particularly if you're dealing with things server side. I'm just going to go ahead and do destroy actor. The reason why I'm doing it that way is because I want to try and avoid outright just calling a function, get an actor from another blueprint and just destroying it. So I could just quite easily go from here and just do destroy actor. But the issue with that is, if I ever then wanted to implement some other sort of functionality for when the actor is destroyed, I then have to find every reference and every blueprint where I'm destroying that actor. So it's far better to just create something simple within there and then call it. And then if you ever want to do anything more fancy than just destroy actor, you can do that without having to go through and collect everything else. So go ahead and call function destroy collectible. So this should work, I believe. Suppose we can give it a test, see what happens. So we've got 2 here, so that's destroyed. So close out. Okay, so we've got some errors. Right, so let's work through these. So access non-transferable property, do collectible, initiate collectible. Right, so that object was empty. But why? Which would mean. Right, okay, so that's probably only a temporary error. So if we play it again and close out. No, we're still getting an error message. Initiate collectible in the Collectible Manager. Right, so in this instance what I think what's happening is, even though they're placed in the world, on the begin play, these are calling there on begin plays before our manager, which is a little bit problematic. So what we want to do is we're going to have to move some things around. So I'm just going to disconnect that for now, the initiate collectible, and what I'm going to do is from here do something very similar when we actually create a new actor. So the only difference is get all actors of class, and then we just want to go ahead and call initiate. Oh, remember the name? Oh no, these is from there. We just need the UID from it. Okay, so initiate collectible, and just get the UID from there. So all I've done here is in essence doing exactly the same thing, however it's the manager yet again that's initiating all the collectibles. So instead of it being the collectible that runs the function, it's the manager itself. So this just means that everything else should be fine. So things such as the SGO collectible should now be loaded. So give that a try and close out. So no errors. Okay, so click that, close out, log back in. Okay, so it's still there, so that's not a good sign. So let's have a look, see what we've done. So set collected comes in there. So I think so destroy collectible, that does pop up, so that's good. So the next thing I want to do, actually in here, in the save game object, just add a quick print screen. Collectible. Let's do a set. This is just to see whether or not this actually gets called. Destroy collectible. So it didn't actually get called. So rookie mistake. So the reason why is because on the branch I'd put false instead of true. So what this section does, I'm sure some of you are probably shouting at your computer screens. So obviously if this contains what we're looking for, then that's when we want to modify. So it should hopefully now work. So picked it up, close out, go back in, and it's still not working. But if you notice at the top it is saying collectible set, so there's something else that's not quite working. So let's come over to here, which is where we're actually saving that game slot. Branch. Let's add some more print strings. So obviously what I'm trying to do here is figure out where the problem actually is. So game save. Save failed. And we'll make that red. So now let's see what happens. So save failed. Okay, so we need to look into why it is that that particular save failed. Which I'm not quite sure. So I'm just going to try deleting this save file. And then, so again, save failed. Is there any particular reason why? Yes, a name in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and set a default in here. Default save name. So game successfully saved. So there we go. So that is, in essence, everything set up. So let's go ahead and copy this a few times. So run through here, pick them all up. Close out, log back in, and they all reappeared. Okay, let's see what's happening here. So they've all got the Collectible Manager, so that's all good. It's got the default save name. So something's not happened. I think I know it probably is. Yeah, so in this instance the save game already exists, and the only thing we do is detect whether or not we need to destroy the collectible or not. So in this instance those particular objects aren't going to be in that list because we've newly added them. Because the only time we do that is to this bottom bit here. So what we'll do is copy that. So found false. So that way if it doesn't find it, it will initiate them and add them to the list. So now, hopefully, they're all saving again. Just like that. If we go ahead and just delete that save, and they're all back again. So the great thing about this is if you wanted to do multiple levels, the only thing you would need to do is change the name that you're saving it to. So that could just be a level name or anything, and then just stick collectible on the end. It's completely up to you how it is that you want to deal with that name. Yeah, but this particular system, it can work with quite a lot of different sort of techniques that you're trying to go for. So at the end of the day, in terms of the actual save game object, you can stick whatever variables in here you want, as long as you've got some way of distinguishing the actual object that it is that you're trying to change the state of, then that's fine. So in terms of the boolean here, you could make a structure and do some fancy things with. So I might as well go ahead and do one, because I do know that save games can be quite confusing sometimes. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a structure, call this struct collectible. So collected. Trying to think what else I could actually put in it. Put this as do anything really. Material. One. Yeah, why not? Let's create a new. Let's create a new material. So simple. That's. Grey. Simple material. Variable, if that to 1, that should make it glow. With emissive. Yep. So we got there. So I want to turn these into parameters. That's colour. There's emissive boost. Okay, and then we'll just create a material instance. Okay, so that's the normal one. So what I'm doing at the moment is just actually creating a material for the collectibles, so when they've been collected. Oh, that's very bright. Yep, that was good. Okay, so the collectible default material. Okay, so yet again, obviously because we've used the destroy collectible, you can change what you actually do. Just for demonstration, I'm just going to go into here and alter the way that I'm going to do it. So instead of actually destroying, I'm just going to go ahead and set the material. Collected. I do think I've gone off track a little bit. So I was thinking about doing the material as a variable that you save, but it's not actually something you would need to necessarily save. I think with collectibles it's usually fairly straightforward. But I think with that slight change, it still actually destroys the actor. Interesting. Did I not save? Destroy collectible. Ah. It's because I had the wrong item selected. Let's try it now. No. It's a funky behaviour. Okay, so it does actually sort of work. It's just because, and again, it's because I'm using the destroy actor, so it's a good example of why not to use it, because you forget. So now if I run over these, they should all sort of turn on. Yeah, so that's save game objects in a way. Do apologise, I've not done anything with the structure. Again, I'm not quite sure what else we could save with a collectible, because like I said, in most cases people would probably just destroy the actor anyway. But yet again, in terms of the boolean within the map, you could change that to anything. So if you do have a structure, you can store other pieces of data in there as well. But yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it's helpful, and take care. Bye.